So happy to have a couple of speakers here with us this morning. One is our partner, Peter Chen I guess Suzanne's coming back in, at New Jersey Policy Perspective, Senior Policy Analyst, Peter Chen, and working on, poverty solutions together. And they have done some great work around a state level child tax credit proposal, and also working alongside us and other allies to expand EITC, and and Brittany also on the call at NJPP, working with us on the TANF reform, and glad to have them as partners. But why don't I turn it over to you and let you share your screen, Peter.
Okay, let's give this a shot. Okay, everyone see that? And apologies, because I'll be glancing at my screen and occasionally back and forth, but you can look at the screen. Okay, so we have been hearing a lot this budget season about affordability. That is the word that everyone is asking and talking about. But the question of affordability largely affects folks at the lower end of the income spectrum, right? If inflation is affecting food prices and gas prices and housing prices, those are going to have a disproportionate effect on lower income folks. And so we have a solution for affordability for low and moderate income folks. It's called cash benefits, right? If things are too expensive, you can give people with less of it more money. It's a fairly straightforward, and it feels like kind of obvious solution, but has faced lots of obstacles. And so, we want to sort of lay out some proposals about how cash is not just I think there's some framing around the need to have quote unquote transformative investments. People want to see a bridge or a school or a thing, right? They want a program. And what the research is telling us actually is that cash itself is a transformative investment, that keeping people out of the deep end of poverty and keeping families afloat and avoiding the kind of financial shocks that poverty provides improve outcomes for kids, families, and the economy as a whole. So with that brief intro, let's talk about the three sort of policy proposals that we're thinking about. So here's background on NJPP. Hopefully you all know us, but we're a think tank focused on economic, racial, and social equity. We're specialists on budget, but we cover a wide range of topics. So I cover a wide range of child and family related issues. Brittany's on here, covers a wide range of healthcare related issues. And we have additional analysts for issues like criminal legal system reform, immigration, and democracy reform. And we have, the minimum wage increase, other accomplishments. We have done stuff. But let's talk about the power of cash. Okay, the problem of poverty is one of not having enough money. There are obviously other factors that play into this, but what we're seeing from the research at a national level and at an international level is cash to alleviate the shocks and deprivation of poverty help people become more successful. And cash benefits lower child poverty, not a surprise. They also improve child and family outcome, and they reduce toxic stress and improve brain development. So cash in the hands of families means we entrust them to make optimal choices, right? We're not restricting based on what we think that low-income folks need, like food benefits, and we're not restricting based on we're not investing in a program that has bureaucratic and red tape and administrative costs. These programs are largely focused on getting cash out to folks who need it directly. And a lot of the sort of philosophy here is we can trust people to make optimal choices for their families. And even if their choices appear non-optimal to us, that they are likely more optimal than the paternalistic state determining exactly what people need. So we're going to talk about three proposals today: a state level child tax credit, some improvements to the earned income tax credit, and also some reforms to TANF, sort of the forebear of cash assistance programs for low-income folks. So let's talk a little bit about a state-level child tax credit. Child tax credit recognizes the cost of childbearing, right? Kids are expensive. And so a child tax credit helps to alleviate those costs by giving families money back on their tax returns for the cost of raising kids. The federal child tax credit, the refundable one as part of the ARP, was extremely successful at lowering child poverty. And our legislative proposal, legislative proposal that's been floated in response to our report focuses on a young child tax credit. So children under age 6. We don't have a bill number yet, but there is legislative language. It just needs to be sort of finalized. And when thinking about a New Jersey specific credit, we had some focuses, right? One is that New Jersey has high costs for a lot of stuff. And although there are existing tax credits in New Jersey for lots of families with kids, a lot of them are limited for lower income families, right? If you're in the EITC range, you need earned income. And particularly for folks with very low earned income, they get very little back from the EITC. The child and dependent care tax credit, which passed with great fanfare last year, it only affects it only affects people who have, formalized childcare costs. So for folks who may be in informal care, for folks who are in relative care, they're not going to have expenses that can be covered. And then the also much valued property tax credit, which is now expanded in the governor's budget proposal. It's much easier to claim if you're a homeowner. And we know that homeowners are disproportionately wealthier and whiter, and renters are disproportionately low income and people of color. So, our proposal is that New Jersey should be a leader on supporting kids. Now, the current proposal that's been floated by the legislature is, households with children under age 6. There was some discussion about whether to keep this an under 18 program or focus on young kids. And it seemed like within the legislature, the appetite was more for, focusing the credit on a smaller population and making sure that the dollar amount was higher. So the idea is that this would be a $500 maximum credit per child. Obviously, this doesn't compare to the federal credit, right? The federal expanded credit was $3,000 per child and $3,600 for kids under age 6. New Jersey doesn't have that kind of money, but this is a start. And I think for families in the less than $30,000 income range, $500 per child under age 6 could really go a long way. Then above $30,000, it phases out by $10 for each $1,000 of income, so that by the time you get to $80,000, it's $0. Again, this is not perfect, but it gets rid of a cliff effect, which we've seen in other benefit programs. And the other thing is that it's fully refundable. So that means that even if a family has no tax liability at the end of their tax year, they still get the benefit, right? It functions as a cash credit. So just to compare a little bit how the child tax credit interacts with or is different from the existing EITC. So, the eligibility is obviously different for a child tax credit. Got to have a kid. Earned income tax credit does not require you to have a child, but you do need to have earned income. Right? So the child tax credit proposal doesn't have any income requirement attached to it. And the increase in the EITC proposal, which I'll talk about in a second, is more like $100 per family rather than the $500 for eligible families in the child tax credit. But it would affect more tax units because, again, it includes many more households that do not have a young child and also includes families who don't have a child at all. So let's talk a little bit about EITC expansion. So earned income tax credit, it's already a successful anti-poverty program. The way it works is, it's exactly what it says on the tin, right? It's you earn a certain amount of income and you get a percentage of that income back as an additional tax credit, like a bonus on top of your existing earnings. And already the way ours functions is a percentage of the federal credit. So the federal credit is set at a certain amount, and we say, okay, you get 35% or 40% back of the federal credit. Currently, we're at 40%. And And that results in about $500 million in state funds going directly to low-income working people. And in 2019, that was about 533,000 beneficiaries. There's a new proposal, though, which would improve the EITC. And this is our proposal for this year. It increases the amount of the credit from 40% to 45% of the federal credit. We would like to see that go from 40 to 50% rather than 40 to 45, but that's something we can always work with the sponsor on. But the other two important things are increases in eligibility. So it allows people with individual tax identification numbers, so primarily immigrant residents who do not have a Social Security number, to file for the state credit, even though they're not eligible for the federal. So they would get back that 40% amount, even though they would not get the federal credit. Now, the average amount we'd estimate for that is like $900, which again is fairly substantial for families earning in that EITC eligible range. And it also allows survivors of domestic abuse to file as married filing separately. The federal credit requires that you file as married jointly, which is obviously a problem for people who are survivors of domestic abuse who do not want to file or don't want the leverage of their abuser, being able to dictate whether they can get the EITC. I do want to talk a little bit about the limits of tax credits. This is for our conversation. I think tax credits are not perfect, particularly because lots of low-income people do not file taxes. Right, they are below the filing threshold, and they are not required to file taxes, and that means they leave a lot of money on the table. And even among the population that does claim the credit, there are lots of predatory for-profit tax firms that take a chunk of the tax credits. So Citizen Action is a great organization in its VITA free tax prep, but the reality is the capacity of the VITA program does not come close to meeting the demand. I think something like 70% of EITC claims at a federal level are prepared by paid tax preparers. And the tax credits can be complex. Like you filed your taxes, it's a pain sometimes to figure out what you qualify for and don't. And that can be a challenge, particularly for households that are low income or in poverty, which are more likely to have sort of complex living situations. But that, tax credits are the current most effective way to get cash directly to families. In large part because the tax system already they're good at mailing out checks, right? So, and all the verification is done as part of income tax filing. So, there's not a lot of red tape involved. The administrative cost of just like jacking up the earned income tax credit another 5% is relatively low. All you're paying for is the cash that's going out the door. So the last thing I want to talk about is TANF reforms, temporary assistance for needy families. So this is the original sort of cash aid for people in poverty. Previously, AFDC. And unfortunately, in New Jersey, it largely does not reach that population. Only about 16% of people in poverty in New Jersey actually receive TANF. And there are many reforms that are needed to meet the original mission of TANF. And there's new reform effort. Previous reform effort was conditionally vetoed and then died in the legislature last session. So this is the new version. It includes most of what was in the old version, which with some tweaks. It's very long and has lots of details within it. But I'm just going to highlight a few of the biggies. It reduces or modifies the often punitive work requirements by reducing the number of hours from 40 to 30 per week, as well as providing more ways and more methods to be counted as work. It expands the income disregard and some other, so that people who are trying to get out of poverty don't get punished for earning. And it expands the eligible population by changing some of the requirements for example, some of the age ranges for children. There are more exceptions to benefit caps. This has long been a problem that people reach a benefit cap and then are no longer eligible for the cash benefits. And then there's also a larger grant amount. our grant amount has been frozen at relatively low level, and this raises it close to 50% of the federal poverty level, which still ain't great, but is more likely to be a benefit amount that allows someone to climb out of poverty rather than an amount that just keeps them there. There's a lot more in it, and I'm sure that I've bungled some of that. So I open it to Renee and Brittany if they have more details to share that they think are important. But I've gone through a lot. I've talked a lot. And I will just sum up our proposals here. So the first one is the child tax credit. You get money directly to families to support kids and child development. EITC reforms increase the value of work, and the expansion will support immigrant households. And then finally, TANF reforms. This is really helping people in the deep end of poverty get back on their feet and get to find sustainable growth in the long term. So those are the three main proposals that we're looking at for this legislative session and hopefully for future ones. Hopefully they pass, so we don't have to do them in future ones, but potentially for future ones as well. Yes, I just talked a lot. And so I pause here for questions or feedback on the proposals.
Yeah, Peter, I just wanted to mention on the child tax credit, certainly the recent Columbia study showed that, the federal, the formal, kind of poverty level soared, towards the beginning of the pandemic to over 21%. A year later, after the federal child tax credit went into place, right? It was 11.5%. It went down. Certainly, we know that it reduced child poverty by 40%, right, at the federal level. And then, of course, it ended in January, and the official poverty rate for children went back up to 17%. So certainly, this is, the state level proposal kind of builds on the success of the federal program, in the absence of that being renewed. And certainly that, and in combination with the earned income tax credit, we know that these are programs that actually reduce poverty and lift families out of poverty, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the other thing that, again, that you all know from your work is that even if the dollar amount is not enough, like $500 is not going to lift most families that are in poverty who have children out of poverty. But we do know that those kinds of cash amounts make a huge difference in being able to smooth over the kinds of financial bumps that often push families into poverty or keep them there. A backed utility bill, or some leftover medical debt, or the car breaks down and you need to fix it, right? These are the kinds of costs that can be devastating for families in poverty, and that these kinds of programs can help to fill. It's not perfect, again, because tax credits, you have to wait till you file and then you get the money back. This would probably not, the dollar amount isn't big enough to be the kind of program where you get a monthly amount, right? If you take the $500 and split it over 12 months, it's not going to be enough to make a huge difference in most people's budgets. But again, I think the bottom line is because of the myriad range of costs that low-income families face, the best way to help them meet that wide range of costs is to give them cash to make the decisions that they need.
Yeah, and I remember about a month ago, United Way of Northern New Jersey put out a fact sheet saying that about 50% of New Jersey families hadn't claimed the federal child tax credit yet, right? And we know that the EITC, there's probably about a 25% rate of families who don't file, as you said, in some of the challenges of these proposals, that families don't file tax returns who are very low income and don't get that credit. And so certainly I think that could be part of why, there was a lower uptake with the federal child tax credit. I did talk to Assistant State Treasurer last Friday or Thursday, maybe. And she said they're starting to see, an uptick, certainly now as we get closer to the tax filing deadline of April 18th, right? But any thoughts on all of that and where we are? And then I wanted to open it up to others to kind of for ideas of how we can get more people to take advantage of these programs. I mean, have you heard anything more since United Way released that information?
I think there's there is a dispute between Treasury, IRS, and survey data about what percentage of people have actually received the benefits. Treasury says close to 82 or 83% of eligible families received it.
Gotcha.
Other survey-based data suggests less. You know, Household Pulse is probably closer to 60% or 65. Okay. But you know, Treasury is basically saying like, we mailed out the checks, so you know, someone got it. Whether they understood that it was a child tax credit or not is unknown, but these checks went out. Okay. I do think though that again, the population least likely to claim it is people making under 25,000, right? Because they don't file a tax return normally, or they haven't in the last few years, and therefore the IRS doesn't have enough information to send it out. But again, the IRS can impute roughly how much there is, as long as they have a W-2 on file and they know that you have dependents from your health insurance data. So like, there are definitely, there's more outreach that can be done on this. And you know, one piece that I didn't mention here is that there is a proposal for automated tax filing in New Jersey. This has died in every state because the TurboTaxes and H&R Blocks of the world come to kill it. But automated tax filing would probably improve take up enormously, right? If the taxation division sends you an envelope and says, hello, we have seen your W-2, we have all your information on file, and if you sign this piece of paper, you get $1,000 back. I think a lot of people would sign it, but you know, that system does not currently exist, even though it would probably be relatively low cost to administer, because again, the tax prep lobby is very strong.
And is there a bill on that proposal?
There is. It's a Ruiz bill. I will.
Yeah, no, if you find it and want to put it in the chat, that's great. So I just wanted to mention that, you know, New Jersey Citizen Action is talking about doing like some sort of event with legislators and others to kind of raise awareness around the child tax credit and EITC, but potentially do it like after the April 18th filing deadline, because people can still claim these credits beyond that deadline. That's just the deadline for if you have to pay the government taxes, right? But you can still claim these credits beyond April 18th. And so we're talking about maybe doing something April 20th, you know, whether it'll be a virtual event with legislators and others, you know, but any other like kind of thoughts or ideas about how to engage more of this, the lower income population, you know, to claim these credits, because it can be thousands of dollars that they're missing out on that could be a huge boost.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tricky because in normal in pre-COVID times, we would have said schools are just a great resource. You could push information out. You could have, you know, use schools as a resource. I mean, they're already enrolling kids in the free reduced lunch program. So families are often comfortable providing their income data to schools, right? Like this sort of, that would be great, except that schools are all slammed, right? They can barely, you know, do their core functions because of the stresses of COVID and post-pandemic schooling. So I don't know if that's a burden that can be placed on schools at this point, but I do think that, you know, principals and supervisors, right, like maybe some of the education groups might be helpful as, you know, conduits for some of this information.
Yeah, I know Lisa's going to talk to us next about some of the anti-hunger policies, and I know that some of that was done through the schools as well. And so maybe you can, when you get to that, you can comment a little bit on how well that worked in terms of reaching families through the schools. But any other kind of thoughts or ideas or questions?
I was just going to say, and I know that a couple of the food banks have resource access teams. I think Fulfill, formerly Food Bank of Monmouth and Ocean, actually has a VITA program. I'm not sure about Community Food Bank, but they do have, and the Food Bank of South Jersey now also has SNAP outreach and application assistance. So they're going out to community-based organizations and they're working with school districts and they're going to community colleges and they're helping people to apply for SNAP. So if there's a way to get some information into their hands so that they could at least spread the word, even if they don't have, you know, a VITA program themselves, it's a great way to reach those households.
And what about the boards of social service? I mean, I know they're always overworked as well, but you know, because that's most of these people, right? They're on TANF because they're not working. And, you know, I don't know how realistic that is or not. I feel like under this administration, it might be something that they'd be willing to do, but
it's a good thought. And I actually reached out last October to DHS and said, can you send direct letters to all TANF recipients, letting them know that they can file and claim these tax credits? I'll tell you that the response I got back was, we got flyers from the Federal Administration for Children and Families, and we sent them out to all the boards of social services and to some childcare centers and that kind of thing. But there's no guarantee that that information is reaching TANF recipients. And as a matter of fact, I was just talking to somebody who was talking with a Mercer County Board of Social Services employee, and they had no idea about the flyers or I even heard about any of this, right? So certainly that information did not get passed on. And I went back and I said, hey, again, can you send a direct letter to all the TANF recipients? You have their information. You do it for other things, right? Like, and yeah. So I'm actually asking through the administration to kind of thread that needle again and get back to DHS and see if they'll actually do something. But I'm waiting on that. But
Yeah,
very good thought.
we raised this concern with DHS and with the front office directly.
Yeah.
Basically saying like, you are always talking about how New Jersey leaves cash on the table when compared to, like, we send more to the feds than we get back. This is a way to get those dollars. Why? Let's try to get them. You know, you can send out letters that people qualify. Like, you have everyone's W-2. Like, you can guesstimate whether or not people, are eligible, and they just didn't do it. And I don't know, like, what the problems are on the administrative side, but even a cursory mailing was viewed as like beyond even when the language itself is basically a copy and paste of what the IRS sends out. They just wouldn't do it.
Sure. Yeah. So certainly there's the whole population of TANF and SSI recipients who typically don't file tax returns and could get these credits, but aren't right now, that we'd love to reach more of. And Jake, I don't know, like, if you know how many like county college students are parents, do you have any of that kind of information?
I mean, it's a significant portion. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I can tell you that 30%, last time I saw the numbers, 30% of our college credit enrollment, so 150,000 students, 30% of them are age 25 and older. And I also know that I think we have about 40,000 of our students who are in career technical education programs who would qualify. 40,000, I think we have 60,000 who are in CTE programs, Perkins eligible, but of those 40,000 of them would qualify for SNAP based on their economic status that they reported on their FAFSA applications.
Oh.
Yeah, and the boards of social services also vary really widely. We saw certainly, and I know that Hungry Free has done work on this, right, where the rate of SNAP usage based on the eligible population varies substantially from county to county, especially for seniors, right? Where, if I don't know, Hunterdon, for example, I'm picking Hunterdon, I don't actually know what their rate was, but like some counties are simply doing more outreach than others. And I don't know, if there's an easy answer for that either.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions on these topics?
I have just one other question, kind of for my own personal knowledge, like the federal, all these numbers, when they say like that, the federal tax credit, child tax credit, reduce child poverty by, down to, I think you said it was like 11.5% or something like that, over 17%. That's just based on that one number, right? So it doesn't take into consideration cost of living. It doesn't take into consideration, so like, someone a family earning just above the poverty level in New Jersey is in a very different situation than a family earning just above the poverty level in, I don't know, Arkansas, but they're measured the same still. Is that correct?
Yeah, the federal poverty measure is the same nationally, right?
Yeah, they're only
cost of
adjusted for
living-
Alaska, Hawaii.
Sorry, go
They're
ahead.
They adjust for Alaska and Hawaii, but not anywhere else.
Why is that?
I mean, Alaska and Hawaii, I do think have uniquely high costs compared to
Right.
the rest of the country,
Mhm.
as they're far.
Yeah.
But yes, there has long been conversation about whether the federal poverty level needs to be indexed, whether it needs to be changed. It's still based on the same formula from 1960, whenever. So like the supplemental poverty level, which the Census Bureau reports every year,
Okay.
is probably a better figure because it does take into account transfers as well as cost of living. The problem with the supplemental poverty benefit is because it's constantly changing, so for example, the supplemental poverty benefit this year includes internet access as one of the costs. Well, internet access was not one of the costs in 1996 or whatever. So it's hard to compare sometimes on a like year-to-year basis because the index changes based on what the costs are, which makes sense if you want to say how many people right now don't have access to a livable budget.
Yeah.
It's a different question when you're saying like, did the poverty rate go up or down from last year, which is what every reporter wants to know. And you have to say, well, maybe it went up and maybe it went down, but we're not sure.
Right, but then we also have the standard of need, which the DHS commissioner sets every year since 2009 that we pushed for. But that's not really used widely in terms of determining eligibility for programs and things like that, and the true poverty measure in our state. But we can look to reports like the ALS report or Legal Services of New Jersey's true poverty report last year as well, to really understand the full extent. But I wanted to just mention too, as we shift to Lisa next, that I was just testifying yesterday again for a budget hearing for the state. And one of the things I brought up is that, we've seen SNAP caseloads expand, and caseloads keep going up throughout the pandemic. We see great need in terms of the emergency rental assistance program and the utility assistance and other programs out there. But as Peter mentioned earlier, the TANF caseloads, which have declined so much since the program was started in 1997 here in New Jersey, keep going down even throughout the pandemic, right? The caseload numbers keep declining, which is a big problem. So we'll talk more about the status of the TANF reform in a little bit, but I wanted to turn it over to Lisa next to talk about state and federal anti-hunger policies.
Okay.
And I'll get your PowerPoint, sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my computer is so slow. I have so many windows open too. Well, let's get started anyway. Hi, everybody. Again, I'm Lisa Pitz. I'm with Hunger Free New Jersey. There's our logo. Hunger Free New Jersey, for those of you that are not familiar with our work, we are a statewide anti-hunger advocacy organization. We work to improve access to healthy food for all New Jersey residents. A lot of our work really focuses on improving access to the federal nutrition programs because we know that they are really the first line of defense against hunger in our state. We do a lot of work on SNAP and the various child nutrition programs. I'm going to talk a little bit today about what is happening in our, and I put it in air quotes, post-COVID world, because everybody is acting like we're out of this, and clearly we are not. But unfortunately, a lot of the flexibilities in some of the federal nutrition programs and additional benefits that were allowed during COVID are going to be sunsetting. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and then also about various pieces of legislation, both federal and state, that we are currently working on that will hopefully remedy some of those issues. So first to talk a little bit about SNAP emergency allotments and other changes post-COVID. So as many of you know, I'm sure, for the last 2 years, households receiving SNAP got maximized benefits. There was a 15% increase to SNAP for a while. That went away several months ago. But households that have been receiving maximized or emergency benefits, emergency allotments, are still getting those maximized benefits in New Jersey. New Jersey is one of a handful of states that has taken advantage of that and still giving that benefit to people. The maximized benefit amount basically, so for a household that would get, say, for example, the minimum benefit of $20 a month, some of those households were receiving over $240 a month. So you can see that it is a significant difference in the amount of benefits that households have been receiving. It varied from household to household, but most of the households on SNAP were getting some kind of maximized benefit. So this will stop when the public health emergency ends on April 15th, just a little over 2 weeks from now. We don't have any indication that that will be extended at this point. The federal government does have to give states 60 days notice. So it looks like those SNAP benefits will not go down probably until July. But we are referring to that as a benefits cliff because there's going to be so many other things going away too, and people are going to see that significant dip in their SNAP benefit amounts probably in their July when they get their benefits on their EBT cards in July. So we want to kind of prepare people for this, but also not freak them out about it. We're going to be working on a one-pager to try to communicate this, and people can push it out through your organizations and to the folks that you serve to sort of let them know this is coming so that people can plan. The other thing is the amount of benefits that are going to be lost here is when the emergency maximized benefits end, on average, each SNAP recipient will lose about $82 a month in benefits. So again, it's a significant amount of benefits that households will no longer be receiving, and will have the largest impact on the households that would ordinarily get that minimum benefit of $20 a month, which does often tend to be senior households or disabled households, especially for folks that live in subsidized housing. They often get that $20 a month benefit. And so it's really going to be, it's going to hit them the hardest. The other flexibility with SNAP was recertification periods were maximized as well. There was waiver of recert, there was waiver of the telephone interview at recertification. But they're starting again. They're starting to require people who are getting SNAP to recertify for those benefits. All the boards of social services sent letters out to the households receiving SNAP, but a lot of people did not follow up on the recert, and we're hearing from a lot of the county boards that quite a few people, their cases have been closed. So they have lost their SNAP benefits altogether. And at this point, I think in all 21 of the counties, the recert processes have started again. And then of course, you all know the utility moratorium ended this month, and we are hearing from a lot of folks that are getting shut off notices at this point as well.
If I could just add something quick to that, Lisa.
Sure.
So Governor Murphy just signed legislation that we and others helped push quickly through the legislature last week that actually allows or prevents shutoffs when somebody is applying for an assistance program in New Jersey for utility assistance. So they still have another 60 days through June 15th to have that protection for applying. And then DCA might take another 90 days to review applications. So it potentially gives them another few months of protections from shutoffs if they're applying for assistance programs.
That's great. Thank you for adding that in, because that's really a critical piece. And again, something that we need to be communicating with folks so they know that help is, and there's a lot of help available too through DCA and other local nonprofits. So So some remedies to at least some of the issues with SNAP. There are a couple of marker bills that have been introduced. These are federal bills. One I wanted to highlight is the Closing the Meal Gap Act. This would do a number of things, but the most important thing it would do is it would change how SNAP benefit amounts are calculated. The way that they have been calculated since the 1960s is using the Thrifty Food Plan. Again, simply put, we all know that the cost of food has gone up exponentially since the 60s, and it's gone up exponentially over the past couple of months. And so the low cost food plan is a more realistic way to calculate, how much in SNAP benefits a household might actually need. And it would go a long way to make permanent increase in SNAP benefit amounts. As of right now, we only have 4 members of our congressional delegation signed on to this bill. We had last week we met with a number of our members of Congress with their legislative staff to try to get them to sign on to some of these bills. I would encourage everybody today, to reach out to your member of Congress and ask them to sign on to Closing the Meal Gap Act as a co-sponsor. Our congressional representatives do support these things, but oftentimes it's just not on their radar, and they have a lot of other things they're focusing on. So the louder voice we have and the more we sort of push them to sign on, the better. So I would encourage everyone to do that. Next slide. Thank you. Other federal bills to strengthen SNAP and improve access to the program. Again, we have really hardly any of our members sign on to these. I think these 3, we only have 2 members. I think only Congressman Sirius and Congresswoman Watson Coleman are signed on. So HR 1753, Improving Access to Nutrition Act of 2021. This one would specifically lift the 3-month time limits for SNAP for able-bodied adults without dependents, or ABODs. HR 1919 is Enhance Access to SNAP Act. That would improve access to SNAP for low-income college students. We've been this is one of our priorities. We've been pushing hard to get co-sponsors signed on to this bill. As we know, college hunger is a huge problem. There were some flexibilities put in place during COVID for college students that had the estimated family contribution of 0 on their FAFSA form, and college students who are eligible for work study but not actively engaged in work study were able to access SNAP benefits. So this bill would make those things permanent and do some other things to improve access to SNAP for low-income college students. And then HR 5227 is Lift the Bar Act. This specifically improves access to SNAP and other programs for certain immigrant households. And one of the main things it would do would be to get rid of the 5-year waiting period for access to SNAP and other federal programs for certain immigrant households. So again, I would encourage everybody to, and I'm going to put, I'll put a link in the chat to FRAC's 1-pager on these so that folks have more information on them. And then again, I would encourage people to reach out to your member of Congress and ask them to sign on. Next slide, please. There we go. The other thing that's happening is the child nutrition waivers that were put in place during COVID are all going to be sunsetting. There were a whole bunch of waivers to simplify implementation of the programs. It was really wonderful for the school districts. It made it much easier for them to provide nutritious meals to the students. It made it much easier for parents and kids to access the programs. For example, still all of the children are getting free meals at school regardless of household income. Everybody is eating for free. We would love to see universal free meals happen on the federal level as well. But there are some advocacy efforts around that. I think that's going to be a heavy lift. And there are some states that are doing it state by state. I don't think that we would be able to do that in New Jersey right now, but there is another bill that I'm going to talk about that would increase income eligibility. But so Free meals for all is ending. The other super important flexibility in the program was during the summer meals, parents could go pick meals up and bring them home for the kids. Were allowed to do grab and go. The way that summer meals usually runs is there's a congregate meal rule in place. So children have to consume the meal on site, which requires summer meal programs to usually offer some sort of programming, and it makes it difficult for people to operate open summer meal sites where any child can come for a meal. So these flexibilities have been critical to ensuring that kids have access to nutritious food, and they're all going to be sunsetting as of June 30th. There is a bill, Keeping School Meals Flexible Act, that calls on Congress to give USDA the authority to extend these waivers, or at least some of these waivers, into 2023. Again, we know that we are not out of COVID, and we may need to have some of these flexibilities in place. We would love to see some of them become permanent, but the Keeping School Meals Flexible Act, HR 6613, would at least give USDA the authority to extend some of these waivers into the next school year. I'm going to put there's a link that our partners at FRAC, our national partners, have set up. It makes it really easy for you to reach out to your member of Congress. All you have to do is click, you put in your information, and it sends an email to your member of Congress, asking them to sign on to this bill. So I just put that in the chat box. And that's, if you don't do anything else today to get your member of Congress to sign on to Keeping School Meals Flexible Act, would be a really terrific thing to do. And FRAC has made it very easy to do that. On the state level, there's a number of anti-hunger bills that are out there. I'm going to just highlight two today. And these are really two that we're really focused on. One is A 2366. It would provide a $15 state supplement to seniors and disabled households receiving SNAP. Other states have done this. A handful of other states have done this. We know that $35 is not going to provide, adequate nutrition for a month for anyone. But we think that this is a really positive step in the right direction to be able to provide some additional assistance to vulnerable senior and disabled populations that are receiving SNAP. Because this does have a price tag, it's probably going to be a little bit more challenging to get this done, but this is a priority for Hunger Free New Jersey. And we really feel it's important. We need to do something to help our seniors and disabled SNAP recipients to be able to access more nutritious food. And then the second piece of legislation is the Working Class Families Anti-Hunger Act. This bill came really directly from Speaker Coughlin's office. He has been, as you all know, a huge champion in anti-hunger efforts. Many of the bills that have been introduced, really, he has been amazing in pushing those forward. This bill would raise income eligibility for free school meals from its current rate of 185% of the federal poverty level up to 200%. Again, we see this as a good start. We'd love to see universal free meals for all. That costs a lot of money. We had hoped to be able to sync this income eligibility up with New Jersey Family Care, but again, the price tag was very high, so we sort of backed into this 200% of the federal poverty level. This is currently in New Jersey. We did get a bill passed last year or the year before that eliminated reduced price category. So there is no reduced price category in New Jersey. So a child from a household earning 185% of the federal poverty level or less, they already are getting free meals at school. This would mean an additional about 26,000 some odd students in households earning up to that 200% of the federal poverty level would also get free meals at school. So again, it's for working class households that are struggling, you know, that are just over that income guideline. You know, we see this as a really good start. And this is really, you know, a bill that we're really very strongly supporting and working on with the Speaker's office. And again, would ask everybody to reach out to your members of the Assembly and the Senate and ask them when it comes for the full vote to vote in favor of this bill. Next slide, please. So for more information, you can go to our webpage at hungerfreenj.org. You can contact me directly if you want more information on how you can get involved. And then I always want to put a plug in for anybody that's still on Facebook to like us on Facebook and sign up for our e-newsletter. You can do that by going to our webpage and just enter your email, and then you'll get our monthly newsletter, which will keep you all up to date on all of these various bills and everything and anything in the anti-hunger community. And it helps you to stay engaged in those efforts. So I thank you for your time, and I'll open it up if anybody has questions.
Thanks for all of that, Lisa. So the last bill, A2368, was that just recently passed in the Assembly last Thursday? Did they vote on that one?
I think they did. Yeah, I think it was going to approps.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it has to go through appropriations first before the full Assembly will vote on it. Okay, for some reason I thought they had it on the calendar for last Thursday, but I could be wrong. And then the other one, it seemed like there wasn't a Senate bill yet.
Yeah, there isn't yet.
Okay.
That one's just an Assembly version, so we'll keep track of that and keep everybody posted. It seems like a lot of the interest in, I mean, again, they both have a price tag. And so there's a lot of work being done around getting the Working Class Families Anti-Hunger Act passed first. So, but yeah, there is no Senate version as of today of the state supplement for seniors and disabled.
Thanks. Any other questions, thoughts?
I see Peter asked, how did you settle on $15 for the supplement? Well, we wanted more. We looked at other states that have done this, and I can't remember which state it was, and I think that they had a $25 supplement. And then again, just looking at the price tag, we kind of backed into the 15. So it was kind of arbitrary, but kind of based on what some other states have done.
Thanks, that's helpful. Yeah, I was just wondering, because yeah, I assume that it was some balance between getting more benefit and cost control. So
yeah, it's always that balance.
Lisa, I don't have a question, but in a public forum, I would be remiss if I didn't take the time to say thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure to call you friend and partner in all this work, and I just appreciate all you've done to help us in our work address the hunger of community college students. So thank you for your continued leadership on all of this.
Thank you, Jake. Right back at you. Thank you.
Anything else on any of the federal or state priorities, or anything that you're seeing in communities?
Yeah, I'd be curious to know if anybody here has been hearing from, you know, any of the folks you serve, if they've been, you know, really mostly the recertifications, if people have been getting in touch that they've lost their benefits or the cases have been closed because of that. I think it's going to be an, you know, again, being able to communicate this stuff to people without, you know, causing panic, but for them to know so that they can, you know, sort of plan accordingly and have the information they need, because I think, with people's cases, SNAP cases being closed because of the research, and then people losing those maximized benefits. I think it's going to have a huge impact, obviously, on the emergency food community. I think, anybody who's running a food pantry is going to see probably an increase in demand as people are losing those maximized SNAP benefits. So it's just something for everyone to have on the radar. You see Laura has her hand up.
Thank you, Lisa. We do run a food pantry here, and I just sent your information on the one slide to our team so that they can, start to be ready for that drop. On a call yesterday, I also heard about the Medicaid research, and currently, even without those research, I know our board is, backed up even with GA, and I just, every workforce has had struggles during COVID. Ours has, I'm sure theirs have, and I wonder if there's anything that we are hearing from the state and or counties or boards of social services and how they're, are they getting any resources to support their staff and their processes with all of this coming up? I wonder if that's something to also look at.
Yeah, I don't know if there's additional supports. I know that from a couple of the directors of the county boards that I've spoken to, they're definitely extremely concerned. It's gonna greatly increase their workload. It creates the case churn, and then they have to go back and reopen the cases, and they're, so I don't know if additional resources have been committed to the local boards. I don't think so, but I know that they're concerned about it.
Yeah, and you think about it, if you're short-staffed and buried in work, the details are going to be, it's going to be easy to maybe not attend to following through on some things that our clients need. So that's concerning.
Yeah, and there are some efforts locally that we've been involved in. It's really more sort of like a pilot and I'd love to see it happen all over the state, for county boards of social services to have a more active partnership with more people to, follow up with these research households and get them to submit their paperwork and follow up with households. It's incredible the amount of people who start the SNAP application process and never finish it because they don't or can't produce the verification documents. So having that more, all hands on deck, more capacity just to be able to follow up with those households so that they can complete the process. And then once they get the benefits, that they can keep the benefits through the research process. That's kind of an interesting way, to sort of help the boards build their capacity. And I know.
Sure. I wonder too, is there any way that we could advocate for staggered research of these benefits so that it isn't all at once for Medicaid and SNAP? I don't know.
That's an interesting idea, Laura. And
Yeah.
I'll just say in terms of the Medicaid side, New Jersey Citizen Action is reaching out to state officials just in terms of when the public health emergency ends, there will be a number of people who will be cut off from Medicaid entirely who got it during the pandemic, right? And the talk in other states is that because they're only getting money for 3 months, but they're being given by the federal government up to a year to kind of go through all of those cases, there's actually this incentive for the states to do it more quickly and just cut everybody off within those first 3 months when they're getting paid still, right? And so we want to make sure that New Jersey's not in that boat or wouldn't be thinking that way, because we know other states unfortunately are. Oh, thank you, Lisa. I see another link there on the federal bills. Thanks. Great. Any other questions or thoughts on the anti-hunger policies and priorities? So let me just share my screen and just kind of go through a little bit more of, okay, where, I don't know if you're seeing my screen yet or not, because I'm not even seeing anything on my screen.
I see that you started sharing.
Oh, okay. Oh, but that's the wrong presentation, I think, right? Let's try this again. All right, I don't know what happened to my presentation, but it's not coming up in Google now. It just seems to have disappeared. But I'll just add, you know, in terms of the TANF legislation that Peter was talking about earlier, you know, we did ask for that in our budget testimony last week and this week to the Assembly and Senate, along with the money for the state child tax credit that Peter talked about, the expansions in eligibility and income, or what am I trying to say? But both expansions in the EITC for ITIN earners and others. We also recognize there was a report by Alan Malik that was produced a couple months ago, maybe, that shows that about 75,000 renter households in New Jersey will still be at risk for eviction from pandemic arrears, who didn't get access to assistance. So we've asked for another 500 million in emergency rental assistance, another 200 million in utility assistance, because we know what's out there is not enough. Definitely on the water side, the new program is only 24 million. And we know there's at least 50 million in customer arrears across the state in water and sewer. And then again, like I said, the 30 million for the Workforce New Jersey TANF reforms that Peter went through earlier. So we were hopeful that that legislation would be put up for vote in committees in March. There was one other priority that kind of knocked our bill out of the committee hearing earlier in March. And I don't know if folks know, but at least on the Senate side, there's now a new rule that committees can only hear a certain number of bills each hearing, right? So that limited it as well. But what we are hearing is that the bills will be up in the Senate and Assembly in early May when the committees start meeting again after the budget hearings. And so we are also gearing up to really kind of get the word out about the TANF reforms. I know Brittany just did a great Twitter thread, I think it was last Friday, right, Brittany, on the TANF reforms and your research and stuff from Center on Budget and Policy Priorities to lift up all the needs in, as Peter said, the many different reforms in the bill, the comprehensive bill. And we are looking at organizing a press event towards the end of April on TANF reform with the Senate and Assembly sponsors, and reaching out to them and talking with them right now about that. So we'll certainly let folks know about that. And we're hoping to have it actually at the State House too, to kind of right before the committees start meeting again in early May to kind of lift this issue up and bring it to the media as well. So I don't know, any questions on any of that or any other kind of issues you're seeing, legislative priorities, events coming up, anything else anyone want to raise?
I just real quick. So Hunger Free New Jersey is launching a new statewide coalition, the Hunger Free Campus Network. And we're going to be having our first meeting, oh my Lord, on April 22nd at 11 a.m. If anyone is interested, I can send you the registration link for that. So I'm going to put my email in the chat box if you want to just email me directly. It really came out of, we co-convened a conference on college hunger with Rutgers about a month ago or so, and sort of officially launched this new coalition that will focus on improving access to food for college students, but really a way for colleges to share best practices and to engage really students and faculty and staff in some of the other advocacy, both federal and state. So all are welcome to attend.
Yeah, and I'll just flag that, our broad budget coalition, the For the Many coalition, we're focused on affordability more broadly, and trying to refocus this conversation about, all these proposals out there. There's so much money in the budget that it means that everyone is jumping in for all of their bad proposals to give them money. And so I think our question that we're asking when we do legislative meetings is, whatever proposal you're hearing about, ask who is benefiting, right? And if it's not low income and moderate income folks, or if it's disproportionately benefiting wealthy people, don't do it. Obviously that's hard as a pitch, but I think certainly from the budget coalition angle, we are aiming to, target some bad guys, as it were, wealthy individuals and profitable corporations. But I think the question of like, if we're going to be throwing money at stuff in the budget, let's make sure that it's helping the people who are hurt the most. And I think this goes back to what you said originally about the pandemic. It's like, for higher income folks, yeah, the pandemic's over. Their wealth is beyond what it was pre-pandemic. They can work from home. They are, they're going out and living their lives. And for people who are low income, all of the programs are running out and they are going to be left holding the bag, especially if we are not smoothing that with state aid. So, I think that's our broader pitch. And, I think it's going to be this, it's weird to say that this is going to be a hard budget cycle because we have all this extra money, but it's true.
And I think it was good that you and I were paired together back to back for the Senate budget hearing yesterday, asking affordable for whom, right? But also to lift up something that Peter is, I'm in the wrong keyboard here, is doing with me on Saturday and others. If you haven't already and you're available for some part of Saturday, the Latino Action Network Legislative Annual Conference is virtual again. And Saturday from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And I will be moderating the Economic Justice panel with Peter Chen, Senator Teresa Ruiz, who is the sponsor of the TANF reform legislation, and Virgilio Aran, who is with the National Domestic Workers Alliance, talking about the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights in New Jersey. And so you can join us. Our workshop is from 10:20 to 11:10. A little strange timing, but will be late morning, so you can kind of sleep in and get your coffee and join us online if you want. But I just put the link to the conference on Saturday if you want to register. And lots of other great workshops and speakers.
And Senator Ruiz, who is
Yes.
leading the charge on most of the bills that we talked about.
Exactly. Yes.
Is, gonna be there too, so.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's great that we're all together for that workshop. Yeah. Anything else? I know there's also been a bit of talk around the state about the ID issue again for folks who are unhoused. I don't know, Sue, if you wanted to, or you have anything, or Laura, you're hearing more about that, but I know we've been working with Trenton Area Soup Kitchen and the network, to kind of talk with legislators and figure out solutions, because we know we had legislation passed before the pandemic that mandated, that unhoused folks can get easier access to state IDs, and it's not always working out in a lot of places around the state.
Our bigger issue, honestly, up in Jersey City is the fact that our residents couldn't get their birth certificates up here until recently, right? Like there was that, back in the early 2000s, there was, birth certificates were being sold out of the records office here, for people to get, falsified identification and passports. So the federal government and the state basically stopped issuing any birth certificates for anybody born in Jersey City. You had to go to Trenton to get your birth certificate. Now that just changed within the last few months, and now they can get them here again locally. But I'd have to go back. This has not been an issue that I've heard our case managers raise as being a real problem. One of the things we've been able to do traditionally, again, because they had to go to Jersey City to get their birth certificate, is, we have a relationship with the state, is we were able to, they accepted like a letter from us on our letterhead verifying their identity, along with some other, types of supporting documentation. And they were able to get their birth certificates that way. And once they had their but again, they had to go to Trenton for that, right? So it wasn't with like the local vital statistics office. It was, they had to go down there. But, from what I'm understanding, it has gotten better recently. I wasn't on the network's meeting yesterday, but I did read the notes that Arnold sent out last night. And from what I read, it sounds like some organizations have been having some real success with this, and also with partnering with motor vehicles to get this done.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. I think one of the other solutions that was thrown out among our small group is that, if we could use like the HIMA system, right, to just as a proxy for ID, to say if they're already in the HIMA system, when we know these kinds of data or information about them, they should automatically be given access to services that they need.
Yeah, and actually, now that I'm thinking about this, again, it hasn't been something I've heard raised from my staff as like a pressing issue, but I'm not quite sure how they were getting people their birth certificates the last 2 years, right? Because the office in Trenton has been closed, hasn't it? They're all working remotely now. So I'll go back and revisit that with them, and specifically, and if anything comes up of concern, I can email you.
Great. Okay. And I'll just put my email address in the chat. If for some reason any of you are not getting the APN biweekly newsletter, let me know, because we had issues where when we transferred the information over to Citizen Action last year, that not everybody could be imported into the system if they had already opted out of Citizen Action emails at some point. So just wanted to put that out there too. If anybody isn't getting our regular emails, you can let me know and I'll put you on the list. Great. Any final thoughts? We'll meet again in 2 months, online probably, but maybe at some point this year we'll start to think about getting together in person. So we'll keep everybody in the loop on that too. Great. Okay. Well, thank you all. Thanks, Peter. Take care.
Thank you.
Anytime.
All right.
Bye.
See you Saturday.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.